Meeting of the board back to order. Let's do the oath of office.
Everyone who is re-elected needs to stand and repeat the oath of office with your right hand raised.
Everybody ready?
No, I have to open it. Sorry.
I state your name.
I, Nancy
Mike
Cooper,
Runner.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly
solemnly
swear
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
of member of the Board of Education
of member of the Board of Education
of Community High School District 99
of Community High School District 99
in accordance with the Constitution of the United States,
in accordance with the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability.
and the laws of the State of Illinois to the best of my ability.
I further swear that
I further swear that
I shall respect taxpayer interests
I shall respect taxpayer interests
by serving as a faithful protector
by serving as a faithful protector
of the school district's assets.
of the school district's assets.
I shall encourage and respect
I shall encourage and respect
the free expression of opinion
the free expression of opinion
by my fellow board members
by my fellow board members
and others who seek a hearing before the board,
and
and others who seek a hearing before the board
while respecting the privacy of students and employees.
while respecting the privacy of students and employees.
I shall recognize
I shall
that
recognize
a board member has no legal authority
that a board member has no legal authority
as an individual,
as
as
an
an
individual.
and that decisions can be made
and that decisions can be made
only by a majority vote
only by a majority vote
at a public board meeting.
at a
public board
meeting.
And
And
I shall abide
I shall abide
by majority decisions of the board
by majority decisions of the board
while retaining the right
while retaining the right
to seek changes
to seek changes
in such decisions
in such decisions
through ethical and constructive channels.
through ethical and constructive channels.
Okay. Let's have a call to order, please.
You should probably congratulate.
Oh, yeah, congratulations.
You got cooed.
Congratulations, all right. All right, could we please have a call to order?
Certainly. Rick Pavanato.
Here.
Nancy Kupka.
Here.
Julia Beckman.
Here.
Deb Boyle.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Don Renner.
Here.
And Terry Pavasich. Here.
All right, moving on. We will now move to election of permanent officers. Anyone can nominate any member of this board. The floor is open, taking nominations.
I would like to nominate Nancy Kupka for the office of president.
Okay.
Thank
You
you.
don't, there's no
You
second.
don't need a second.
Any other nominations?
I would move the nominations close.
Okay, we'll close the nominations and
Might need a second for that.
I'll second that.
second that. Proceed to a vote.
Julia Beckman.
Aye.
Terry Pavasich.
Aye.
Deb Boyle.
No.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Don Renner.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Congratulations to you. Yes.
Okay. We need a, thank you all very much. We need a nomination for vice president.
I'd like to nominate Terry Pavasich because she's been, for vice president, she's been a long-serving member of the board, and I'd like to see her be vice president.
Thank you, Julia. Any others? Do we have a close of the nominations? Julia?
So moved.
We need a second.
I need a second.
Second.
John seconds.
Thank you. Julia Beckman.
Aye.
Don Renner.
Aye.
Deb Boyle.
No.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Nancy Kupka.
Aye.
And Terry Pavasich.
Aye. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Terry. And finally, we have election of the secretary. I'd like to nominate Ms. Julia Nidek.
I second that.
Any others?
I'm sure there's a battle for that position.
I move that we close the nominations.
Please.
I move that we close
That's
the
right.
nominations.
Poor Julie.
Yes,
Yeah, before she withdraws.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Don Renner,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich,
Aye.
Nancy Kupka, aye. Thank you very much. You're newly elected.
Congratulations, Julie.
Okay, moving on to the adoption of District 99 policies and regulations.
I move that we adopt the District 99 policies and regulations as presented.
Second that?
Okay, we have, is there any discussion?
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
Don Renner,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich, and Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Moving on to the approval of meeting dates and places.
Make a motion to approve the calendar board education meetings for 2015, 2016.
Second.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Don Renner,
Aye.
Terry Pavasich, Julia Beckman,
Aye.
Deb Boyle,
Aye.
and Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to the search firm presentations.
I'm sorry,
We have-
committees and-
No.
Excuse me.
The next one.
I'm so sorry. Appointment of board committees and liaisons. Okay, what I would like to do is we have a list of the committees, and much like we did last time, if people could let their interests be known to Julie within the next week or so, that'd be appreciated. And every effort will be made to give everybody what they want to have for their committee selection. Does that seem fair?
I'd just like to say again, I appreciate being reappointed to the SACID board.
Yeah.
We appreciate all the work that you do.
That was last week, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, right. That's already been done, but I just wanted to make that statement again.
Okay. Now we can move on to the search firm presentations.
Okay, several of us are going to take our leave. Dr. Kupka? Mr. Tice is the man on deck.
Before I go grab Steve and Pam, I thought I would just kind of quickly go through the process and the activities that I thought would help us this evening as we compare the two search firms and want to reach a consensus on which firm to go with. So, as you know, we had contacted the various firms for proposals, and you had indicated that there were the two firms that you wanted to see present this evening. So we'll start with Pam Hollick and Steve Humphrey from Hazard Young, Attia and Associates. And so they'll make their presentation to you. We asked them to keep it to about 30 minutes. We then want you to be able to ask questions of the presenters. When they are done presenting, in your packet you see a document that has Hazard Young Attia at the top. We would like for you to, on your own, write down first the strengths that you believe that firm would bring if we were to hire them here in District 99. Then write down your concerns. And then the third question, could you support hiring that firm to lead the superintendent search and the reasons why you would, or I would not support that and the reasons why you would. And I would ask that you do that individually so that you all have a chance to capture your thoughts before any kind of advocacy would occur. Once you're done with those sheets, we'll set those aside. We will bring the second group in from School Exec Connect. That'll be Kathy Robbins and Tom Madden. Give them that same opportunity to present. We'll allow the board to ask questions of the firm. We'll have you complete the document that has School Exec Connect at the top. It's the exact same format. I'm going to get the chart paper that I've got set up over there in the corner. I'll set that back up. And then what I would do is go around the room and ask Julia to give me one strength that she had identified from Hazard and Young. We won't discuss it at that point. We just, Julia's giving that to me. Terry then gives me one then Nancy, and everybody gets an opportunity as we keep going around the room until all of your strengths are on the paper. Then we'll go to the strengths for the other firm. Then we'll do concerns. We'll put the Hazard and Young on one side, the School Exec Connect on the other. And then we want to start having discussion about advocating for one over the other, things we liked and didn't like, et cetera. It's designed this way so that all voices have the opportunity to be heard and that you're able to put your thoughts down before we start into the advocacy part. Does that make sense? Any questions, any concerns?
Pretty straightforward.
All right, let me go grab Pam and Steve, and when they come in, I'll have them turn and introduce themselves to the camera.
Steve Humphrey, Hazard Young and Tia.
I'm Pam Pollock, also at Hazard Young and Tia.
Thank you.
Good evening. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here. We typically would talk a little bit about Hazard Young and Tia, but we really want to listen to your questions and have enough time to do that. So hopefully that's part of what we do, because this is a search for executive, and it's your search. We want to be your advocate in that process, represent you, and District 99 is a great place. I think we should be excited about the opportunities for candidates, because I think location, history here, the accomplishments of your schools, programs you have for students, extracurricular, academic, tremendous services. It's certainly a well-known place and involved in DuPage County. And so I think you have so much going on. And while it'll be a change, I think that starting early as you are is going to be an important piece. I think, again, we'll have a good time recruiting because of the early start. But the change, nevertheless, and I think probably the most important decision you'll make as a board, as a team. We find that this typically brings people together, which is important, I think, as you go as a group. We want you to be a board making a critical decision. And the thing that sometimes isn't so obvious as an organizational group like yours is that your actions as a board does influence the candidate pool. People think about that a lot as candidates. Your actions as a board certainly send messages to the staff and to the community about what's important to you and how you're approaching this. So we look forward to working with you through the process and helping you with that. Hazard Young and Tia has been around for over 20 years doing searches across the country and in Illinois, certainly. I serve as the Executive Vice President of ECRA Group and Hazard Young and Tia. And so organizationally, I'm very involved with the company and what we do nationally and locally. This is my only search. If we get to do this for the year, I only take on one or so a year just because of the involvement. I work full-time as our executive in our company. And so with me is Pam Hollick, and I'll ask Pam to introduce herself in a second. But we bring with us a number of resources. As an experienced company, we have over 150 associates nationwide, a number of associates in DuPage County and Illinois, and certainly if we're doing the search, we're going to tap into that network in DuPage County and the state. A number of our folks have been part of IASA in the state, part of IASA in the county. I've worked with the ROE in the county as well as some other groups within the county of DuPage. We've had a joint project in my previous life with 99. And so there's certainly a regional history here that I have that I think would be a benefit as we look at candidates and recruit. So I think, again, the experience of Hazard Young and Tia, of doing searches, of being part of a bigger company. We're a full-time company. We have office space, full-time employees. So we're always there. We're always perfecting and working on the process of searches from a standpoint of what goes on out there in the world of searches and trying to replicate the very best. We stress quality. We stress ethics of the search. We work with our candidates very closely. So tonight, Pam's going to introduce herself. Thought we'd run through the flow chart, which is inside your materials. And tonight I give you a few more materials to go with the proposals. So tonight in that book, a little research about superintendent leadership, which we focus on a lot. Some materials on there's an overview that I put in there. It's just a one-pager give an overview of tonight in terms of who we are and what we'll talk about. Pam's resume is in there. Behind that is a due diligence flyer on a due diligence company. We certainly use due diligence companies to third party to check backgrounds for your final candidates, recommend that. And that can be, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But we want to focus on the search process and how we look at that. And I think maybe the best thing, if you could just interrupt us as you have questions about those various phases, that's great. We don't really do a canned presentation, so we're just having a conversation. So please ask as we go along. So Pam, you want to introduce yourself?
I will. I joined Hazard, Young, and Attia about 2 years ago when I retired as the superintendent in Glenwood. I was down in Glenwood for about 8 years, and like Steve works full-time. I thought I wanted to work full-time when I retired, but I've enjoyed retirement and continuing to work. So it's been a very nice blend and transition to a new, just sort of a different lifestyle for me. But I have lived in Illinois almost all of my life. I started my career by working overseas as a teacher in some years where it was very difficult to get teaching jobs, and that was my passion to teach. So I found a way to get my foot in the door, so to speak, and spent I've sort of moved south as I've gone through my career. So I spent 20 years up in Northbrook as a classroom teacher, as an administrator, and subject area coordinator, and some different kinds of things. When I was overseas, I taught at the high school level. And then spent 8 years as a principal of 2 very large elementary schools, and then served as a superintendent in my last 8 years. So I'm here with you this evening. I've been working on searches with HYA and enjoying this work, and continuing my work with human resources as over the last 2 years. So thank you for having us here tonight.
The way I usually approach the search process, while Pam is working closely with us, is there are a number of other folks out there that I mentioned earlier that I will be in constant contact with. So this team is really bigger than the 2 of us. Some of you may have run into Bill Attia along the way, or president of HYA, and Bill and I actually talked today a little bit, and I see him every week. So he's certainly a resource, as well as other associates in Illinois. So we have a diverse team that'll be working, bring that information to me and to Pam and through the office as we work on this. The flow chart is on the left side of that proposal booklet. Does everyone have a copy of that? Okay. I think that's probably a good reference point, and you'll see this flow chart from us and from any other company you talk to about searches, because it's pretty standardized. I think that, and whether you talk to a private firm that does huge HR work internationally, or you talk about smaller companies that maybe operate out of their houses, the flow is kind of the same. You plan, you recruit, select, and appoint. Those are the element of phases. I think our value added is the depth that we bring to that, because we are a research company, because we've done this so long, and people like Bill and others before me certainly have perfected those standards that we live by and how to have a quality search. And so I think our processes go very deep. We always get the feedback that we're very thorough. We get the feedback that we're very organized, a lot of communication we want to stress tonight. And the engagement piece, I think, is really important as an overview as well, depending on how much engagement you want, and that's a choice to make, because there's options that you may have seen in the proposal book about how we engage the community. One of the big choices as we get into the planning, we'll talk about this, is an open search or a closed search, and there's advantages to doing both of those. Again, we're your agent, we're helping you, we'll do it whichever way you want to do it, and we'll talk about those as we go through the planning phase with you. But the whole idea of the flow chart for us is going deeper, being organized, keeping everyone together, so we do this in a way that you get done what you need to get done, and candidates see us in the best light as well. You want to talk a little about planning, Pam?
Yes. If you look at this flow chart, it's very, excuse me. Obviously, we have the 2 columns, and it says board responsibilities and consultant responsibilities. And it's very easy to look at it just going straight down the 2 columns. Okay, here's what we're going to be doing, here's what they're going to be doing. But I also like to emphasize that these lines going back and forth are really important, because there's a give and a take between us. We're going to be working very closely with you over this period of time during this search. And as Steve mentioned, this is a really great time to be choosing a firm, and with the timeline that you have, we can really customize this search as much as you want. Not that we wouldn't do that anyway, but with community focus groups with a much shorter timeline, sometimes it's hard to get them all to do the amount of outreach that you might really want. And when we say it's a customized search, we really do mean that. So I'll start with talking about the planning phase, but these are broad brushstrokes. So if you have a question, or do you do this or do you do that, or something that might be very particular to your board or to this school district, please ask, because there are all kinds of variations of different themes as we go along. But the planning phase, the very first thing that we would want to do with you is set up a meeting within a few weeks after you determine that you would want to work with us. And at that planning meeting, we'll actually sit down, and there's a draft in your folder. This is just sort of a sample, where we'll actually map out the timeline so you know what to expect. It's hard to bring 10 people together. So we want to know what that timeline is going to look like. We'll get it down to very specific dates. By this date, we're going to have this for you. And we're going to want to meet with you on a certain date to give you your leadership profile report, for instance. So you'll have a sense of when this is happening. You'll be able to say to your constituents, to the press, this is when we are planning, as long as all goes well. Sometimes there are little glitches, and we all know that. But we anticipate naming a new superintendent in this week, the first part of this week, or first part of November, or whatever it might be. We actually mapped out for you on this little one-pager a possible calendar, so you have a little sense of that this evening. But at that planning meeting, we will go into much more depth than these possible dates. So we would say possible calendar, the planning phase would start where we'd have a meeting with you in June. Recruitment phase, July, and October. And I think it's important to also emphasize that the planning and recruitment phases, there's a flow back and forth between them. So some of those things are actually happening simultaneously. We wouldn't wait completely until the whole leadership report profile is finished and presented to you to start advertising the position, for instance. So some of those things scaffold a little bit. At that planning meeting, we would also be talking about how we would advertise, some of your options for advertising, some of the compensation. What do you have in mind for a compensation range? If you need more information on what compensation looks like for superintendents in a comparable school district in this area, we would get that information for you to provide you with as much guidance and assistance as you want. We also develop a communication plan with you. Who would our liaison be, so that we could actually get information out to the board in a timely fashion if we need to get information out to you. There's a sample of the survey that we use. This is the actual online survey that we would be posting. And talking about the timeline, when would this push out? Obviously, we might not want to do that with staff over the summer, when people are maybe on vacation and those kinds of things. So this would be part of this, and we actually take this survey as part of the planning to develop a profile of what your new leader will look like, if that makes sense, what your vision is, what characteristics, as part of that leadership profile development. The focus groups we also set up as part of that planning meeting. Who do you want us to reach out to? Part of the focus groups, we would interview each of you independently on a one-on-one interview. But then, which teacher groups would you want us to interview? Community groups, parent groups. Do you want us to interview students? We've done that as well. So it can be as extensive or narrow as you wish. It's very custom to who you want us to reach out to and where. It doesn't always, those meetings don't always have to take place here. You may want us to go into those communities or someplace central to those neighborhoods if it's reaching out to parents, for instance. So it can be all of the above or whatever is your comfort level for your community. And then from there, we also develop that leadership profile report, and it really does get to the heart of the matter between all of the information from the survey. There is an open-ended question on the survey, and you will see all of the comments. We will compile all of those so that you can see them as part of the report. And then there'll be trends. Administrative groups there were these trends with these particular administrative groups. The community is looking for something like this. Overall, what kind of characteristics did all of this information compile to tell us about what you hope to have in your new superintendent, if that makes sense. And that profile report, I have found, really helps to keep us all grounded, so to speak. Our goal is to bring you 5 to 6 candidates, and that's certainly part of the planning phase as well. How many candidates do you want us to slate to bring to you? You'll be able to look at applications, if you wish, as they're being filled out online through AppliTrack. We can set you up so that you can look at those applications. But as you're interviewing and getting to meet candidates and going through that process, sometimes it's easy to get a little bit off track. And the leadership profile report will bring you back. But this is what we said we were looking for in our superintendent. This is what our community is concurring with us. And it's not just something that is nice to have. It's a very useful and it's a working tool. And you can post that online as well when you receive it.
And probably, as Pam said, the two work together. The idea of the planning and the criteria and getting into recruitment really go together. The criteria will end up being maybe a page of specific items, 10 or 12 items. That becomes our rubric for searching and recruiting. So that's what we'll put our candidates against. So it is your local search. So the input we gather from all the 7 board members and the staff in the district office and the staffs, certified, non-certified, as Pam points out, and we do the focus groups. All of those go into making up that criteria and drives our work, basically. And we really pay attention to that because that's where the fit is. And while there's a lot of leaders out there, they may not fit 99's expectations. And so we really believe that fit is critically important in what you're looking for. And most of the times, it won't be somebody identical to Mark or Dave Eblin. It'll be somebody else, but it'll be a new leader. But we want that leader to fit what your perception of that leadership should look like, because we're really looking for a quality person. In the idea of the recruitment phase, we're going to do preliminary interviews with the candidates, look at the paper copies. I expect a good number, because we'll have a lot of assistant superintendents applying, I think. Given the location and the size of the district, we'll have some sitting superintendents applying, certainly. So there'll be, I think, a good number of candidates. We'll begin screening those candidates and recruiting this summer. Once we know that we're going to work with you, then we begin that process. And basically, while we don't know the fit yet from those criteria, we do know best practices. We have a general idea of what you've been about. I've been around the area enough and what you've worked on, have a good idea of what you're potentially who you are and what you're about, enough that we encourage people to apply. And then once we get this nailed down in September with that final draft of criteria, then we start looking at really who do we need to go after to bring in. Of the final candidates that you're going to get, over half of those will be recruited candidates, people who will not apply. And so the value added that we bring to you is that we go after candidates we think are a good fit.
We'll reach out to them.
We're digging and we're pulling and encouraging and saying, have you thought about it? Yeah, you're comfortable where you're at, you've done a great job, but there's a great opportunity here. That, in my experience, and the way that I've approached the searches, is that we really dig to bring in candidates. So we're not just post a job, see who applies. If you do that, we're all going to get the same candidates, no matter who you bring in to talk to you. But I think our value added is digging and really networking with people that really see potential leaders coming up and seeing good work out there from other leaders, and so trying to create that match. Once we get that done, the selection process, we're going to bring those candidates to you, certainly, and talk to you about the candidates. We'll present what we call a slate. At that same time, we're going to work with you on interview scripting and questions that you want to ask, and come up with a process for asking the questions that you're going to need to ask, and how you're going to work with each board member being involved in that. The other thing that we're going to talk about a little bit back in that planning session and evolve as we go through the process is the amount of engagement that you feel comfortable with from the community. Certainly, today, there's more transparency in government and organizations than ever before, and we're all comfortable with that transparency. But from a standpoint of HR and doing a search, you're really trying to bring in candidates, the best candidates. When it becomes very public, people who are sitting superintendents have a difficult time applying. And you know that story, I won't go into that. I'm happy to answer questions about that. So there's an advantage to having a closed search, but in the booklet we provided you, you can see some options about how you have a closed search, but have community engagement. Community engagement starts with the focus groups that Pam talked about in the surveys. Their input's being part of the criteria you're considering for your candidate, part of what we consider when we recruit. But then we can have a community group, staff group involved as we go through the process at the end to give you feedback as a board about what they saw in the candidates that would work and what they saw that might not work in District 99. Then you, of course, are making the final decision. So that there are ways to make it engaging depending on what your culture is and how you look at the world that way. So once we do that, a piece about selection and get organized for interviews, we do the interviews. We're working hard with the candidates. One of the other value pieces we bring to this is that we work very hard with candidates, because we know that to keep candidates coming in recruitment-wise, we need to be fair to them. We're pitching, if you will, the District 99 culture, the 99 board, and your good work. We're talking about the good works of the district and what Mark has been doing and people before him and the team. We're talking about the district as much as we can to say, it's a great place, you should be a part of this. So we're recruiting and working on that whole piece of working with what's out there. Some of that's done by advertising, but most of it's done face-to-face and by phone. We'll probably make some decision about how you want to look at national searches versus local. Given certification issues in Illinois, it's tougher for outside candidates to come to Illinois. It's about a 6-month process, depending on what state they come from, but I plan 6 months with people I've advised, because they can have to take the test, then they have to take a course sometimes, and so it takes a while. The other overlay is the pension system, which has changed for outside candidates, and so that's a question. So that all means that you can look at outside candidates, and that's certainly doable. And given your location, given your time frame, we've got time to do that. But just be aware that there is that turnaround. You may want to see how those folks from outside the state stack up against maybe local candidates that you may be familiar with. I'm sorry.
I was also going to say
We're not too verbal up here, so just have to jump in.
Yes. I was also going to say that we stay with you throughout all of the phases. So once we present a slate to you, we don't say, okay, there it is, good luck. We will be as involved or not as at your comfort level. So we'll help you craft questions, put together a script for you, and organize some of those materials. Some boards want candidates just to come in and they greet them and they handle that interview, those first interviews by themselves. Sometimes we've actually been there to bring the candidate in and then leave, or sometimes we've sat in. It can be all of the above, depending on your comfort level. If you want help debriefing information after interviewing the slate, that's certainly something that can be done as well. So we're there to support you through this process from the very start to the very end until you're happy, is what it really comes down to. So I can't stress that enough.
So the selection process, and we recommend that we help you debrief, because you might not all agree. We have some processes we use to try to bring agreement and consensus to the candidate, because ultimately people want to know they were certainly the strong majority of the board before they take a job, as a new job, certainly. So we will suggest that we help you debrief that process through your decision. We don't have a vote in that at all. It's just processing where you're at, why, and how do we make a decision.
We won't tell you who to choose.
No. No, we don't. We don't even get close to that. So it is certainly your choice and people that you want to work with. Once we do that, as I mentioned earlier, we're working with candidates. We're helping them think about compensation. You have to know the compensation range. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking to the candidates, so we don't want any surprises. So if somebody comes in and says, I expect this big number, and you've said, I expect this reasonable number, we don't want you caught with, oh, we really like this person, but we're not going to pay twice the salary to get that person. So we're going to help work that behind the scenes for you and with you so that you're comfortable with the salary range. It's what you think is fair and what think your community would be proud of, and a number and compensation that will keep candidates with you for a number of years and so on. So we help with that. Through the appointment process, we would like to see, as you get down to the final 5 or 6 people, we suggest that you get down next to the next level is final 3 interviews. Typically, so the first round is like 5 or 6 people on a Friday afternoon, evening, Saturday. We meet with you Saturday afternoon right away to try to get down to the final 3 people. And then those interviews are typically a dinner interview with significant others and the board, individual board members. And then we ask the person to bring their spouse or a significant partner to that dinner at least, so you can kind of see what, the dynamics there. And then the spouse or other is dismissed, so you have another 2-hour interview with the candidate to go deeper from that first interview. And then after that, those 3 interviews, we recommend 3 because you may lose a candidate along the way and you don't want to be left with just one candidate taking off a choice. So we like to say keep 3 going forward. And then we will debrief with you again about those final 3, get down to preferred candidate, and help with you in extending the offer and meeting with that candidate to talk about the offer. And then you will be talking to your law firm, and that person may seek legal advice as well to work on a contract. And then the announcement, which I've tentatively slated for that week of November 23rd, but we can move these times back or forward. I kind of felt like that gets you out of the holiday season for trying to schedule things, which is just a bear. I see no reason starting early that we couldn't be done in early November or even earlier, but I don't want to push this too fast either so we don't have time. But we would want to set those dates with you and your dates, primarily the ones that are important, would be those interview dates. Those are the ones where you want everybody together. The other times when we're with you, Pam and I will be talking to you individually. Otherwise we'll be meeting with you in a board setting, like before a board meeting maybe, or like tonight, to do our business together, which are not often. So the key meetings are those 2 days of interviews for the 6 candidates or 5 candidates, and then the 3 dinner interviews, and just kind of lock those dates and hold them. But it's part of our June planning. So throughout that, then we have some draft press releases for you to talk about the process. At the end, we talk to you about the idea of the press release for the candidates. So we also offer, as part of kind of optional services, workshops that will help potentially transitioning, because we believe transition is really important with the candidates. They'll probably all have a transition plan to talk about as you go through the interview process, some idea. Sometimes that goal setting with the new candidates, helping board team building is important, and so in our materials you'll see that we do have things that we do optionally outside the search process. As Pam said, we're staying with you until we finish the search, and we have the guarantees. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about the guarantees, and then we can probably wrap up and try to get to some questions.
The guarantees are right there on this one-pager in front of you. The first one is that we stay with you until you're satisfied, and the new superintendent has been selected and employed. The second one, if your superintendent departs in the first year for any reason, then we'll redo your search with no additional cost, other than expenses that might come up. And if the superintendent leaves within the first 2 years, then we will redo the search, as long as the majority of the board members that are currently on the board are still here. If that makes sense. The third one is that once we place your superintendent, we will not recruit that person away from you for at least 5 years.
That's a nice one.
We said we will reach out to other school districts, but we don't recruit our own away from our own school districts, so that is a guarantee to you. And then we'll price match any other competitive bid that provides matching services.
So we think the difference for HYA for you, I've mentioned a couple of things that we think matter more. I think our process, our company depth of being thorough and research-oriented, and some of our technology pieces add a lot. Our emphasis on communication, that professionally I've always emphasized is doing the work in the field. I know Pam to be also an excellent communicator. I think it's really important. The knowledge of what leadership looks like today going forward, because we're a company that's dealing with the future of schools, we're always up on current themes and trends nationally and locally in terms of what the work looks like, what should people be thinking about. So we're going forward about where you're going to be in 5 years. What kind of a leader is it going to take for 5 years from now? What worked 20 years ago or what worked 5 to 8 years ago may not be the same leadership that you need going forward. Things are pretty dynamic. Things are very difficult today. Things are very complex today. Your superintendent is going to be very important to you in terms of your community partnerships, in terms of your parent engagement, in terms of your school confidence. You may be hiring new people. I think you have a principal going out at North and down the road, mentoring new administrators, building a cohesive team. That takes some real strong character qualities that we think are important, that not everybody has that. Just because I've been a superintendent for 10 years doesn't mean I can do those things with other people, that I can build relationships with a board. I may have done the job, doesn't mean that I have good relationships with my board, or I can build relationships with my team, or I can communicate with the community. We're looking to really set your candidates apart from the very best. And one of the things that I've always done, I will not bring you any candidates that I can't stand behind personally. And I know Pam feels the same way. So if we don't have anybody, you won't have any candidates. Because I'm not bringing you 5 people to have 5 people so we can walk away from this.
And I always say we want to make your job as easy as possible. We know this is a huge responsibility, and it's a very serious one. But at the same time, we want to make it hard for you to choose from that slate. We want to bring you really 5 to 6 really strong candidates that you will have to really wrestle with who is your new superintendent going to be, because we want to bring you that level of quality in these individuals.
So as we present candidates to you, we'll explain why we think they're setting apart from other people, how we think they fit your criteria that we set up way back at the beginning of the process. So you'll have a good feel for the candidates. We'll entertain questions from you in our closed sessions about candidates to try to make sure we get the right people. If you want to interview 8 people or 10 people, that's okay with us too. You know, if you want to interview 3, that's okay. If we only have 3 key candidates, which I don't believe, but then we would tell you that up front. Our thing is being very open and honest with you. You're going to know everything about this that we know as we go through the process. And trying to simplify your lives. You've got a really tough job. Just like the superintendent's job changed over the last 20 years, my gosh, the board members' lives have gotten to be tremendously complicated and very involved. And, it's just tough work today. But I know we take a lot of pride in what we do professionally. The company does, and we stand with you to do the very best job. I think we've got good people, strong commitment, and some really solid processes that will help you communicate and make selections that you'll be proud of.
Can we open it up for questions?
I hope I didn't talk too
Our
long.
time is going. Would somebody like to start? I have a few, but.
I do too, but go ahead.
All right, I'm going to ask you, what is your success rate?
It's at the bottom of the sheet.
Did I miss it?
Yeah, it's at the very bottom of the page.
328 hired since 2000.
History of
Oh,
success.
Okay, sorry.
Well, I've got a follow-up on that.
And
Yeah, but.
I've placed about over 1,000 superintendents.
Who stay in those
and how many
jobs?
did you have to do twice?
Not many, not hardly. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, none. Sometimes it took us 2 years to get it done. I mean, literally. There have been searches that last a year and a half, 2 years. But those have been really difficult places, not Illinois. So that can happen, but we stayed with them through the whole process. But the longevity, we stress with candidates that you need to think about at least 5 years. So, we think that's a good amount of time, research, indicates that, you can make changes in 5 years, 7 years might be better organizationally, the longer you stay. The longer you keep someone, the more successes you'll see. That's pretty much borne out in the research as well. The more the team is together long-term, they'll get more focus, more will get done as well. So keeping people longer, but we hope to find people who want to be in this region, stay, raise families, stay here because of other connections over time, and stay with you for a longer period of time. But you had a question.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, the 10% that lasts less than 4 years, what, can you give me some feeling for why that was?
I think the prevailing rate over the country is changing board members. I mean, the election schedule, if I had to point to one thing, and I spend a lot of time still mentoring superintendents today. I get a lot of calls every week just to talk. But the change in the board thought about what their jobs are versus superintendents, and when an election occurs, I want my own superintendent. Our majority wants our own superintendent. So a lot of those 4-3 majorities out there, and it's become very contentious and very difficult. So I think we're going to see the longevity of superintendents go down historically, and the average right now is 3 years.
It's down to 3 years.
3 years nationally. So it's just such a difficult landscape. It's become more political. But again, we're looking at people, and we're looking at a board that's done good work. So, you can keep somebody if you know what you're about. Other questions?
Julia?
You mentioned, and it's news to me that it's difficult for someone to come from out of state because we've got some requirements that other people
Right.
don't. Plus, I knew about the pension issue. But we were thinking that we might need a national search this time. What do you think, or do you have a percentage of how many you've brought in from out of state in the last few years? And
I had one last year, and we had one this year in Illinois that I know about. And so it's not difficult to bring them from out of state because Illinois is a very desirable place. You got Chicagoland area, then you come down to the great suburban lifestyle that Downers Grove and your other communities feature, right? So you can recruit them. I think we just want to start looking up and say, look, start talking to ISB, get your documents in. If you come from a state that doesn't require certification for a superintendent, there's some of those out there. So Florida, Virginia, the state of Washington doesn't require that. You can be a non-traditional candidate. So you will see sometimes in those states retired military people, and so Norfolk, Virginia, for example, had a retired military guy for a couple of years.
a couple of years.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things where there were some requirements about how you were to address that that person, like colonel or whatever, and staff didn't get that. But so things don't always work out. Other questions?
But you're starting early enough.
Yeah.
I had, so in your experience, what have been the 1 or 2 biggest mistakes you've seen boards make, and how are you going to help us over those?
I think staying together is important, and remembering that you're a board collectively. That's very difficult sometimes. You're elected individually, and so sometimes the individual thinking drives a lot of what you do in your recommendations when you get those from the administration. This is a time where you want to be together. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but you want to come through this together as much as you can. The other mistake that costs you candidates is if board members start contacting candidates. Nationally, that has happened, and everybody quits. So when board members start calling candidates, a whole slate of candidates quits. So again, let us help you. Let's define the roles that you're playing and for the candidates so they understand. But being a team is really important.
Anybody else? Okay.
I was just kind of waiting to see if others.
Right, me too.
Yeah, so I have a few. How many other clients do you have right now? I mean, what's your capacity for taking care of districts
You're
like
it.
us?
For me, for her,
And-
both of us.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Are very
just finished other work, so.
Is that typical for you, or do you?
And in my busier years when I was doing searches, I would do 2 a year. Because it takes a while and it takes a lot out of you. You know, you're digging, you're corresponding, there's an intensity to this. It goes on for a while. So I really think it's important to limit And we do that for all of our associates nationwide. We'll find maybe 2, maybe 3. Some of the folks are retired. It's all they do is searches, and so they've got their own system, and we help them and from the office because we have an office that helps. But I just focus on one at a time, and that's all I do for the year. I do a lot of help recruiting with other associates, so I'm on the phone talking about candidates all the time and talking to other associates all the time as part of our office work.
You mentioned that how did you put it? You know what we're about. So I was wondering if you could put that in words. What do you think we're about here? at
Well, I
District
think you're
99?
about quality leadership. I think you're about your community. There's a lot of history. You're approaching in a few years your 100-year anniversary, and you've got a strong strategic plan, goals about curriculum instruction, assessment, and facilities. Talk about technology, talk about communications with your community. Talking about, I'm missing one. Let's
High
see.
expectations, high academic expectations.
And the resources, your people and your money. And that drives, a lot of where you're going, and you've made a lot of plans in your strategic document with that, but that's a living set of goals that I know you're working on all the time. But like so many others, you're poised to potentially lose a few dollars depending on what happens to the legislation in Springfield. So, that's going to be a concern, and how do you balance all that? But you've got some really strong financial people advising you. I think your CFO is a premier person, and so resource-wise, you're in good shape. But I think who you are is you're going to be in transition because you have a new leader. You're a new board. Not many changes on the board, but it's still new, and it's going to be different than what it was, because we never go back. We're always going to be different going every day. You're going to have complexities next month that you haven't had this month. Challenges you didn't have last year, you're going to have this year. We don't even know what they are yet. It's going to change you.
How do you see the pool? I know you said we would be an attractive district, which is good for us to hear, but is it because of all the difficulties you just described?
Right.
Is it a thin pool? Is it going to be
Thinner than we would want.
Mm-hmm.
I think you start setting up high expectations for the quality we're thinking about. It limits the pool quickly. But there's just less applicants because of the work these days, the longevity. People don't like moving their families around every 2 or 3 years. It's a difficult thing when you start getting beat up in the press. People decide I can teach or teach at university, teach in a school setting, and not take that public beating. So it's very unsettling for a lot of people. So just less people want to do that. Salaries have become very competitive for teachers, and time, away from the office. You're not 24/7, and so I think it's a difficult job. So I think the pool is less than what it used to be. But that's why the recruitment is so important. That in trying to discern quality candidates from people who have maybe done work, but is it really what you want, what you're looking for?
Thanks.
To kind of follow up with that, to put you on the spot, because you do have feelers out there in the community, do you kind of off the top of your head know a few people that you would think would fit in our system?
Yeah, I always have people that I'm talking to that I think down the road in a year that job's going to be open, this will be a good fit. So I have a couple people that I like a lot, but I haven't interviewed them and haven't seen your criteria, but I know they're younger, upcoming people that are very strong where they're at. I hear good things from their supervisors. So I'm one of those, because I'm mentoring and talking to a lot of people. I'm always thinking about recruiting.
Right.
I've been in HR work a long time, and so you just think about that. It's just sort of a natural thing. But we don't have a stable of people. I don't have 6 people I'm trying to place. I don't have people that I'm going around saying, that used to be kind of the perception of search firms.
Right.
I just don't do that. I have never had the same 2 candidates in 2 searches, ever.
Okay.
And because I really put a lot in, this is a very important thing to you. I'm going to be like your kind of adjunct superintendent for a while. And I'm going to do a really quality job for you because this is really, really important. And I really, frankly, and I know Pam feels the same way, we were superintendents. We think this is a really important job. We have to get this right because that person reflects on us, too. So we'll make sure you have the best people. So it's a commitment that we both make.
And we enjoy this work.
As a follow-up to that.
Sure.
Your materials reference that you typically produce 10 to 15 candidates for the interview. And tonight you're saying 5 to 6.
Well, that's where the 10 to 15 is what we would interview and screen from the
Okay,
paper. So we might get,
not what you present to us.
yeah, normally you would get 5 or 6.
Okay.
And the only difference is if you want to interview more, and some districts do, then you just have to devote more time to it. And what we would do when we talk with you about the slate of candidates, we're going to interview 15 or 16, 17, whatever it is. There's not a magic number to that. We look at the paper and we say, these guys should be brought in, and gals, and let's talk to them. Then we get down to, we're going to discern who are the 5 or 6 or 8, and we get down, we come to you and say, we've got a slate. We have 6 people, but we've got 2 that are pretty good, and you might be worth your time to talk to 8 people. So there's not a magic about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. It just depends. If there's 4, there's 4. But again, I could explain why there's 4 and not 5, if that's the case. And Pam and I would collaborate on that, and so we're going to agree on how many, and that's why you have 2 people, to have a difference of opinions, and why we bring other people into the process. But there's not a magic about 15 or 5 or 6.
As far as community involvement, I'm sure it's going to be a pretty important subject for the
Yeah.
board. We can have ideas here, but you're the professionals and you have the experience in handling these types of forums and focus groups.
Right.
How do you attract involvement through the community? Do you do anything specific or special that sets you apart from your competition in that regard? Can you sort of outline the process and maybe give us an example of what worked in other communities and how you got a good level of community involvement in this process?
I think you got to go beyond the all-call system. We're going to have a meeting tomorrow night. Please show up at 7 o'clock.
Sure.
We're looking at, I think, targeted audiences. So who do you have that exist that you already target for different things? And you have a number of people. You have your church leaders. You have your civic leaders. You have your community leaders. You have your organizational leaders in the community. You have the programs like the girls softball traveling team, the boys baseball traveling teams. Those special interest groups out there that have a lot. So we have a lot of targeted audiences that we can hit. You have some higher ed people potentially in the community. You have social agencies, a lot of those around you, and as well as service organizations. So those are all things we could list that we would want to probably invite. You may have others that you work with and worked with closely over the years. You may have some retired board members, for example, that we typically have talked to, or foundation members, or other fundraisers that worked with you in some capacity over the years. So we try to help you target that list and then shoot things out from you and talk about how important it is. And again, sometimes you'll have 300 people at those meetings, but more likely not, you'll have 10. So the targeting helps. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And it also does help to not hold all of the meetings here.
Right.
To go to those areas. So if there are certain, if there are field houses or park district facilities or something like that where people would be likely to congregate, it helps to push out. Go to each, hold meetings if it's just an open general forum, and there will be some of those. Then hold them in those neighborhood schools or at the 2 high schools, some at North, some at South, if that makes sense. So that we're getting out into the open as much as possible, so that people don't just always have to come to central office.
Well, and then hopefully we'd be able to also go through your civic leaders locally and their groups. So we can ask those other groups who have groups themselves that they've targeted. I mean, to invite people, robocalls, the phone calls, the blast emails, all those things are possible depending on what your technology is here to do that. So we certainly can go through a number of lists and usually work with the district folks to develop that list. The schools have lists of people they've worked with, the elementary schools, the feeder districts, for example. We spend a lot of time with those folks, the leaders as well as their organizations, parent groups, and so on.
Lots of people.
But it's just a ton of groups, and so it's important to get out there. The survey helps a lot because people are so busy, so the surveys are really important. If we can let people know that's really important to respond. And again, the board's talking about the importance of the search to the community, and this is a big deal, and you should be involved, and we want your input. It's going to help us with the search. Reinforcing those kinds of messages are really important.
And we will ask people, the final question in each focus group is there anybody that you would like to see as your superintendent? And you would be surprised, people will give names, and we reach out to those individuals, to all of them.
Interesting.
Yeah, you get folks that work down the road someplace and live here, but they know somebody down the road that maybe they've seen lead, or people talk about, or they may be in classes with people, or maybe somebody taught the class. Maybe they worked with somebody previously someplace. So all that's a way to get candidates. But that interaction with those groups are very important.
Do we have any last questions?
No, I'm fine, thanks.
If you think of something tomorrow, just call our office, and I'll be there tomorrow, or Therese, and we can answer any additional questions.
Nancy,
that
can I
way.
ask one more?
Sure, last question.
What type of search would you recommend? You outlined 4 different options as far as whether it being open or closed, and sort of a range within those 4. Is that something that you could recommend tonight, or is that something you need to wait until we've met and gone through the planning
I
session?
think talking with you would be important, but closed searches really maximize sitting superintendents and experienced
Yeah.
people. It just gives you a different level of candidates in terms of experience.
Yeah.
Open searches, you typically will not have a lot of sitting superintendents apply for those, unless they don't have a job next year.
Exactly.
So, but the ranges then, I think doing the confidential committee works really well, having a closed search with a confidential committee. And then that process allows you to bring in 20 or so people across the spectrum of your community leaders, staff members, parents, and so on, to interview. We have them sign off on a waiver saying that you understand this is confidential, not to release information, and they're giving input back to the board. That works really well. When you want community engagement to help, at least give you feedback. But the thing is, they get to meet the candidates at some level, and then that exposes us a little bit to some issues. But I can tell you, when we've done that, that never gets violated. Never been a problem.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time and your
Thank you.
interest.
Thank you. It's
Good
good to
luck.
see you.
It's a
Thanks for
big deal.
coming out.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, did you tell me?
And my name is Kathy Robbins, and I too am a partner with this firm. Wow, I didn't know that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that was my
We make
fault.
noise while we get there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Nancy, our time frame, about half hour?
Half hour, we'll leave some time for questions, please.
We can do it.
We've all had an opportunity to review your materials.
Okay. We give you a quiz, or?
No, please not that.
Spoken like a teacher.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. We are School Exec Connect. My name's Tom Madden. We'll introduce ourselves first and then get into what we handed out. We do know how to use a PowerPoint projector and a computer to make it work, but we believe that it's important for you to look us in the eyes, you know, as we make our proposal, because if you do choose our firm, Kathy and I are the two that will be conducting the search, and we're going to be out in the community representing you as a school board, and you need to get a sense of whether you want us doing that and whether you feel comfortable with us. So, again, my name's Tom Madden. I'm a retired school superintendent. I retired from Lamont High School District, but prior to Lamont, I was principal at South High School here in the district. And prior to that, I was principal at West Aurora High School. And although I did not know Mark McDonald, we followed in each other's footsteps, it seems like. After I had left, a few years after that, Mark became principal at West Aurora, and then he became principal here at Downers, High School District 99, the South Campus, and I remember to use that phraseology, by the way. And I don't know if any of you were around at the time when the change was made, but it was in the mid to late 80s where, I think the board and administration said we represent, 7 communities? And we need to call ourselves District 99. Anyway, and then I was also back here 8 years ago to help you find a new superintendent. That was a fast 8 years, wasn't it?
Hard to believe, isn't it?
Wow.
And it was an interesting search, and it was a kind of a first-time option that we provided. And I know Terry and Julia were both on the board at that time, but you knew you were going to have 1, 2, maybe 3 internal candidates, and wanted us as a firm to look at the internal candidates first, do the kind of things that Kathy will be talking about in just a minute to prepare us for the search. But, if we found 1 or more internal candidates that we knew would be part of a slate, we would share that with the board. The board could go and interview that person if the board was comfortable, which you were at the time. You hired Mark. Then we stopped the search at that point, and since we did half the search, we charged half the fee. And I've since that time, that was the first chance for me to do that, provide that kind of an option. I've done it with the Batavia School District as well, and it can work. So I don't even know if that's an option here, but if it is, we would offer that same kind of opportunity. The one last thing I'd like to say, and then turn it over to Kathy, is that high school districts, high school level, is hard. I was a high school principal twice, a high school superintendent once, and it's difficult. It's difficult to be an administrator at a high school level in a high school district, difficult to be a superintendent, and it's difficult to be a board member in a high school district. I sort of knew that, but then in retirement, I had a chance to be an interim at a small elementary district. And it's harder at the high school level. So if you don't know any better, it is what it is for you. But it is a difficult job that you have, and I want to compliment you for that.
Well, and as Tom said, if that's all you know, and that is all I know. I was a high school superintendent as well for 14 years. I retired 2 years ago from Leiden High School, and I spent my entire career in high school. No elementary experience, but high school teacher, and then a dean, and principal, assistant superintendent, the whole bit. So all of my experiences at a high school level. I'm the past president of the Illinois Association of School Administrators, and I was on the executive board of the high school district organization for several years. And I've lived in Downers Grove for 40 years, so my kids went to school here. I know the district. I know what a great place it is. My kids got a great education here, so I thank you for that. So what can we tell you about School Exec Connect? We are in our 11th year as a firm. The firm was founded in 2004. The president of the firm is actually Linda Hansen, who was the retired superintendent from Highland Park Deerfield High School. So she started this firm after she retired, and Tom and I are both partners now. Tom came on board with her very close to the beginning, and I came on board with him about 5 years ago. We have about 60 consultants. We've done well over 250 searches. We call ourselves a Midwest focus with a national reach. We have consultants primarily in Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, Indiana, Missouri, and Ohio. So kind of the Midwest, but we have consultants that have national reach throughout the country based on some of the organizations that they are a part of. And so, as we'll tell you later, about 20 to 25% of the superintendents that we place are actually recruited. And I just was on a search in LaGrange, and we recruited a superintendent from Telluride, Colorado. So even though we're Midwest-based, we do have a national reach. We know as members and former employees of this community, that it's really important for you to engage the community in this process. One of the first things we would talk to you about if you wanted us to help you with this search would be whether or not you would want a confidential search or a non-confidential search. And it really would be our recommendation that you do a confidential search because it really attracts a broader pool of candidates. But we also know that you want to have your community engaged in this process and your staff engaged in this process, because this isn't something, you want to get it right. You have a history in this district of having superintendents that are here for quite some time. When you think about the average superintendency in Illinois, it lasts about 3.5, 4 years. So you've had a good track record of having long-standing superintendents, and we'd like to continue to help you with that record. But it's important to engage the school and the community, and we do that in several ways, even if it's a confidential search, which means, because I know that most of you have not gone through this process before probably, but confidential search just means that the only name that is released to the public is the finalist, the person that gets the job.
And one advantage of a confidential search, and some of you may be anticipating this advantage, is that, your next superintendent, the last thing on his or her mind today might be that he or she's going to be changing jobs, usually because they're happy, they're successful where they are, their community likes them, the board likes them. And on top of that, if they actually applied for another job and they got wind of that back in the home district, sometimes that doesn't settle well. And so we think we can get a better group of candidates if we can promise confidentiality.
Right. But our process certainly allows for staff and community input. The first way we do that is through our focus groups, where you would help tell us which groups of people, which stakeholders we need to speak to. Typically, it's central office administrators, building administrators, representation of staff members, community members, parents. It might be the local mayors, whatever groups are stakeholders in your district. We would meet with them, typically in groups of 10 to 12 people, and gather their input. And we ask the same 3 questions all the time. We ask, what are the strengths of the district? What are the challenges of the district? And what are the skills and the characteristics that the new superintendent needs to possess to be successful? And actually, we usually ask another question as well, which is, what are the priorities that the new superintendent should focus his or her attention on that first year? So we spend hours and hours talking with members of your community and members of your staff. We also have a customized online survey that we would put out through your website so that anyone from the community or staff could look at that. We will, and then I'll talk in a minute about what we'll do with that information, but we'll communicate the process and the calendar on your website. And when it gets to when you get down to 3 finalists, then we would recommend and help you with, if you chose to go this route, we would recommend that you involve some staff and community members in final interviews on those people.
And that would be the confidential committee?
Yes, that would be the confidential committee, and they would give you some input then, their thoughts. We always tell them, you don't rank them, we don't want you to tell us, here's the guy we like best, or just say, we just want the input back to the board. And then it gives a good cross-section, and it helps you see what other people are thinking, seeing if their impressions and perspectives are matching up with yours.
And traditionally, I'm not sure the process as we're describing it now is much different than you heard from Steve and Pam. And it's, we tend to follow the same kind of process, whether we're better at it or than anybody else is a question for you. But it's not that we're not creative. The process has been shown to work. Mm-hmm. And that's why, especially the private firms, tend to use the process. And even the School Boards Association, when they were doing searches years ago, didn't use that process and has started to because it does work. One thing we want every member of your school community to be able to say is that they had a chance to provide feedback. So we do invite certain people to be part of focus groups, anybody can be part of the online survey. And by the way, we use the software SurveyMonkey to do that. And then in addition to that, we always schedule an open forum for community and an open forum for staff. So those people that weren't invited or couldn't come when they were invited, wanted face-to-face contact, we give them that opportunity. So at the end of this process, every single one of your school community members, in one way or another, has the ability and opportunity to provide information to us.
Okay.
Now, how do we get these candidates? Well, you can see on the form it says national and regional advertising. Education Week is still the premier national newspaper that people look, see what the market looks like, marketplace. And it's always the last 2 or 3 pages, and I guarantee most principals and superintendents, when they get it, they turn it over and look at that, just maybe out of interest or just to see what might be out there. Print advertising in Ed Week it's pretty pricey, and you get maybe one print ad 1 week, and it could cost you $700-800. They do have online advertising that is less than that, and you can have it online every day for as long as a month, and that's what we normally suggest. And nowadays, prospective school administrators know how to use the internet and look online for jobs. So we use Education Week, we use the American Association of School Administrators, which is the national superintendents group, and then the local one, of which Kathy was president, the Illinois Association of School Administrators, is the Illinois Superintendent Group. We put it on our own website as well. And also, our own network. Now, I know some of the private firms, they when they make a presentation, they talk about having 200, 300, 400 consultants. Well, in reality, they're talking about their network, the people they know that they can turn to and either do reference checking or get some thoughts on who might be a good candidate, and they just call them associates. These people have never done searches or even make a presentation like we're doing. Earlier, when Kathy mentioned we have 60 consultants in our firm, we deliberately keep it small to keep people busy and interested in the process. And so it's a deliberate on our part. But, I'm one of my part-time jobs is executive director for the Federal Lands Impacted Schools Association. This has to do with federal impact aid. But just my email network there has 300 names nationwide. I have my own, I call it my superintendent search email group. And it's school administrators, it's school board members, it's school district attorneys, who are oftentimes a good source. And with our networks, 1,000 people are hearing about this search just through our own private networks. Also, recruiting is an important part. We don't just post the job and see and wait to see who comes knocking on the door. You mentioned earlier 25% of the superintendents that are placed are recruited. That doesn't mean we owe anybody anything, because we don't. We represent school boards. And one of the early lessons I know I learned, I started doing searches in the early 90s with the School Boards Association. And, we have a chance to get a particular search, and I'm thinking of people I might want to give a call to and say, you ought to look at this, and actually made some of those calls before we did the focus group, before we knew what the district needed. That's how dumb I was back then. And you came to realize, you can't go recruiting people unless you know what the district needs. You need to have a good fit. So back in those days, I had to call people back and say, sorry, I jumped the gun a little bit. Now that I know what the district needs, you're not it. There'll be a fit later on, and just stay in contact. I said it nicer than that, though. But, so you do need to understand what the district needs before you can really recruit properly. So recruiting is an important part. Some of the searches we've done in what we believe to be similar kind of communities, you can see there at the bottom of page 3 there, Community District 99. Now, that was 8 years ago, so it'll be interesting if we get to search to see how our
Things have changed.
superintendent profile report compares to 8 years ago. That'll be interesting. That can be a long time. But Kathy and I did the Lamont High School search. Our firm has done the Glenbard High School search, Barrington, the Oak Park River Forest search. North Shore 112 is an elementary district, but it's in Highland Park. It's a community with high expectations. It wasn't the high school, Highland Park Deerfield High School District. They ran into some problems with their last search, and we didn't do that one. But the Downers Grove 58, we've recently done LaGrange, River Forest, and Township High School District 211, one of the larger high school districts.
The firm's done lots of other searches besides that, but we just tried to pull a few that might be familiar to you. And other than your own search, these have all been done like in the last 3 years. So what is it? What are the consultants' role? If you hired us to do this job, what are we going to do for you? First thing we're going to do is advertise the position, as Tom mentioned. We're going to engage the community and staff, as we talked about, through focus groups and the survey and the open forums that we do. We then kind of take a look at all of that. As I said, we ask the same questions to everybody. And of course, the board would be a focus group as well. But we ask the same questions of everybody, and then we take that information and synthesize it and analyze it and put it together in a report form that we would come back to the board with. We call that our new superintendent profile. So we would bring that to the board for your approval. And then we use that new superintendent profile as a screen, as a filter. The minute this job is advertised, I'm sure we will start getting online applications. We use the AppleTrack system, and I'm sure we'll get applications through there for the position. But as Tom said, we can be looking at some of those, but until we really know what the community says, what the staff says, and most importantly, what the board says, we don't really know what we're looking for. But once the board has said, yes, you got it right, you've nailed it, this is what we're looking for in a new superintendent, we use that as a screen then. We screen all the applications through that, and that's how we recruit our candidates as well. We do a really thorough job, I think, of finding out information about our candidates. We do extensive internet searches, and education is really kind of 6 degrees of separation, or maybe it's about 3. Because if we don't know somebody, or one of our consultants doesn't know somebody, we know somebody who knows somebody, and you pick up the phone and you say, what can you tell me about, right? So
We don't just check with the references that
right.
the applicants give us.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't, we go beyond the references they tell us to call, and we call others. We would never bring a candidate to you that we hadn't done our homework on. We also make sure that we check their references, and we also make sure that we check their licensure. It's getting more and more difficult to hire people from out of state, particularly if they've never been a superintendent. And so we want to make sure that the people we bring to you are qualified and endorsed and can do the job. So, districts run into a problem on occasion with that, and it's really difficult. It hasn't happened with our firm, though, that I'm aware of. So then and then Tom and I will interview face-to-face upwards of 15 or 20 of the candidates. And then we narrow that down to 5 or 6, the top 5 or 6 that we think best match your profile. And we would come back to you then with the information about those candidates. Here's everything we've learned about them. And then kind of turn you loose and say, okay, if these 6 people look good, then we start the interview process. Because I think most of you, maybe only a couple of you have been through this before, and maybe Terry, for you, it was even just the partial search with Mark.
For both of us.
For both of you. Oh, that's right. Okay.
I didn't remember when Dave Eblin was hired. That was about when you came on the
It
board.
was right before.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, right before I came on board.
Okay. Well, so we will hold your hand through this process. We would help you with interviewing techniques, with questions, with just the process, how to go about this. Because what you would do then is the board would interview those 5 or 6 candidates that we bring to you. We will provide all other information, obviously, as I said, conduct a workshop with you on interview materials and techniques. And then you would narrow that down to the 3 finalists. That's when you would bring in a confidential committee, if you choose to do that. Most boards do, but not all do. But I think, again, it's another way to engage the staff and the community in that process. So for those 3 finalists then, they would come on board. You would interview them. We provide all the committee materials for that. We'll assist you with salary comparables. We'll assist you with contract negotiation if you'd like us to, and kind of communicate and support and hold your hand throughout this process. This is not something you want to do again anytime soon. It's not good for the district. It's not, I mean, you want to find the right person. And we would like to help you do that.
You have a history of holding on to your superintendents. When I was with the district, Dave Hendricks was the superintendent. I think he was here
Several years.
6, 7, 8 years. Then Dave Eblin, quite a long time.
I'm 17.
17, and Mark will be 8 years, I think. So you've got that history, which is a good thing for prospective candidates to know about you. Let's talk about your role. I'm going to talk about, some of the things Kathy's already mentioned. When we complete the new superintendent profile and present it to you at a board meeting, what we're hoping for is you give us a nod and you say, yeah, you got it. That's what we need. If there are things that you know that ought to be part of that and we missed, you need to let us know so we can include that in the profile. But again, as Kathy said, that becomes our filter, our screen for who to recruit, who to screen in and out of the process. And then your role, again, once we present the slate of candidates, would be to interview that slate, 4 or 5, 6, sometimes as many as 7 candidates. And the Board of Education will conduct the first round of interviews to get it down to finalists. And then that's when you may choose to use a confidential committee and get them involved. I want to mention what the tradition has always been in superintendent searches, and we've gotten away from it a little bit in some of our searches. So the tradition is, let's say you've got 3 finalists. What you'd normally do is bring them in and they meet with maybe 1 or 2 committees and then meet with the board. And again, the committees, there will be no doubt in their mind what the role is. And their role is not to make a recommendation to the Board of Education of a top candidate. They should not do that. They will have the opportunity to interview each candidate, to listen to each other's questions, but when that's done, they provide individual feedback. And that feedback is given to you, but it's from individuals, not a group recommendation. But in the past, if you had 3 candidates, you try to schedule them to come in 3 consecutive days, because it gets harder to remember the first candidate when you get to the second or third one, especially if you can't even do it with 3 consecutive days. Plus the committees that you use and your own schedules, you have to be available 3 separate times. What I've begun doing, and it really works well, is to bring the 3 finalists in all on the same day, not at the same time. Let's say they're going to interview, let's say Kathy's candidate number 1. She comes in, let's say at 2 o'clock, meets with committee number 1. At 3 o'clock, she'll go to committee number 2, but while she's doing that, I'm the applicant number 2. I come in and meet with that first committee. So it's the candidates will meet with committee 1, 2, and then the board. And then we stagger them by an hour. So in 3 hours' time, you've interviewed all 3 candidates. The committee has, while they're all still fresh in their minds and in your minds, you're able to discuss them, and it's done in one day. And it's efficient, and I think even stronger because you're not trying to remember what candidate A said 2 days ago or 3 days ago.
And let me just throw this in too. Whether you do that process or the more traditional one, which would be 3 separate days, go to dinner, second interviews, we also recommend as a firm that you have the candidate make a presentation, the finalists make a presentation to you, 10 or 15 minutes, on a topic of their choice. That way you kind of have a feel for, what this one's passion is about or what this one's area of expertise. More importantly, you get a real good sense of their communication skills. How do they relate to a group? It's important that a superintendent is able to communicate his or her thoughts and ideas in an articulate way. So we always recommend a presentation, and that's just to the board. It takes 10 or 15 minutes, but gives you a lot of information. A lot of information. I'm sorry, you do.
Well, and because of the confidentiality and the personnel nature of this, those interviews with the board, and especially the finalist interviews, are done in closed session. And then, as a board, you make your selection. And also, Kathy just reminded me, the conducting of 14 reference calls is another suggestion.
Sure.
Not one of you has to make
No.
14 calls, but there's 7 of you. If each of you would take 2 references, if you need additional references from us to fill out the 14. So each of you would make a couple of phone calls, and oftentimes it just reaffirms that, yeah, these people deserve to be our finalists.
What we typically do, though, is we ask and this is for the finalist only, and we ask them for 14 references, but it's not just give us 14 people who are going to say something nice about you. We want to talk to the president of your union. We want the name and contact information for one of your principals. We want contact information, so it's targeted. So then we give those 14 names to you. We give you questions that you can ask them. And then you each make 2 calls. And as Tom said, I think it really, hopefully, in most cases, it affirms your decision. But I think everybody gets a little buy-in then, too, because you've personally talked to somebody who's given you their perspective. So it's kind of I think it's something that I'm not sure the other firms do that, but it's something that we've started doing a few years ago, and it's been really helpful. I think boards have liked it.
And again, traditionally, once the firm gives you the slate of candidates, the ball was pretty much in your court, and unless you had questions of us, we were done. Well, Kathy and I don't tend to operate that way, and one of the first searches that I did where I didn't operate that way was District 99, 8 years ago, and you've used the term, we'll hold your hand through the process as much as you want to. Before you get upset with that phraseology, that actually came from this board, that search. When I said, I'll do whatever you want, I'll be with you, I'll sit in on the committee interviews to make sure people, behave appropriately and accordingly, and that holding hands comment came from this board, and we did. We were with you through the whole process, and then we do a lot of these. There's nobody in this room, no board member, who has ever done a complete process. Julia and Terry did a half a process, but nobody in here has done the full process. So we know what the routine is and what the protocols are, and we'll be with you every step of the way as much as you want.
Okay, I want to keep us on track here. We're getting sidetracked a little bit. You've taken too much of your time, and I know you're tired here at 9:15 at night. But just to give you a little summary of the search process, I think we've talked about all the pieces of this process. But time-wise, we've got some months laid out. I'm assuming, and you'd have to tell me if I'm not right, but I'm assuming that you'd like to finish this before winter break? You talked about, okay. So we sort of figured that, because that's when this first wave of superintendent searches kind of comes through. And that's the perfect, you're positioned very, very well to do that. So we backed it up from there. So that would mean, this process is very flexible. We can adjust it however it works for you. But we thought we could do our planning meeting with you. If you chose us to do this, the next thing we would do is sit down with the planning meeting. And a planning meeting where we really talk about step by step what we're going to do. We would talk about timelines. We would actually help you set up dates for board interviews, first interviews, second interviews, because it's not something you want to wait to do until a couple weeks before the interview process starts, because you'll never find dates that work for everybody. So we actually sit down with you in that meeting in August or September and help you set those dates right then. So we'd walk through that whole process in the planning meeting. We could do that planning meeting in August, September. We could actually do it June or July. If the board's meeting over the summer, we could easily do it then as well. The community engagement piece, we could start with the community piece August. As former teachers, and we know, don't bother the teachers the first couple weeks of school, or the staff members. I mean, it's crazy. We certainly recognize that. So we would wait a couple weeks, at least into the school year, before we would start the focus groups with staff. But community, we could do whenever. So, but we figure we could get all the community engagement piece finished, certainly, probably in September. Not even, I don't think it would even have to go into October. We could finish all of that in September. We could bring you back the new superintendent, probably late September. Then we, as I said, that we would then use that as the screen. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't I say that? New superintendent profile?
Right.
Yeah, okay. We would bring you that synthesis of all of the information. We would bring you that probably the end of September. Pardon?
What's that noise?
Is it feedback?
Yeah.
It's been doing that for a while. Do you want to just maybe push it on the side and just slide this over and share?
Oh,
it?
the two mics?
This one's better?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Turn that off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we then would be interviewing heavily during October and recruiting as well, and hopefully would present a slate of candidates to the board in November. You would do your first interviews in November, second interviews probably early December, maybe late November. It gets a little tricky in there with Thanksgiving and things, but, and then hopefully you would be able to finish the contract negotiations and award a contract at your December meeting. And then the new soup would start July 1st. Provide plenty of time for transition with Mark. So you're on a great trajectory pathwise, but know that we can, this is real flexible, we can change it however it works for you.
And I'll go through this quickly. We are flexible, and I think we demonstrated that the last search we did here. There was something unique about it, and we were able to make those adjustments. As a partner, some of the things I'm really proud of is that we've finished every search we've done, we finished on time and within budget. That our success record is that 96% of the superintendents we've placed got a second contract. They were successful enough to get a second contract. As we've said before, about 25% of the place superintendents are recruited. 20 to 30% are out of state, but we, the advertising will be national. We will get applicants from across the country, but before we make too big a thing out of that, Illinois is pretty unique. And unless there's a really outstanding candidate from out of staff who's a quick learner and can get up to speed in Illinois, not only laws, but politics, your next superintendent is more than likely will probably come from the state. Not that we don't restrict it, but it takes somebody special. So if you get an out-of-state person that we give you on the slate, there's something special about that person. We have our own annual meeting as a firm to review practices, make adjustments, make sure we continue to grow and get better. And again, as a partner, that last comment, we've never been sued, never been refused payment, never had a search terminated because the board didn't like what we were doing.
Yeah, and I am proud. I think our firm has a great reputation. And we do actually operate on a credo that we talk about at our annual conference. And our credo is that we are responsible to students first. Tom and I both, having been superintendents and teachers and administrators, know that the kids are why we do this. The kids are the reason that I think Tom and I still do this, because we really believe that every district deserves a great leader, great leaders, and that makes a difference in a student's 4 years here. So we're responsible to students first. We're responsible to boards of education, obviously. Our contracts with you, we work for you, and we want to make sure that we are doing a search that is meeting your needs and is one that you're going to be happy with the result for a long time. We're also responsible to our candidates. We're very respectful of our candidates, and we treat them right. And we're responsible to the members of the firm. As Tom mentioned, we work closely together. And part of what we do at our annual conference every year is get to know one another better so that it's real easy to pick up the phone and call, and you know who you're talking to on the other end when you're asking for information. As far as our guarantees, we guarantee to present candidates to you until we find the right one. And if that takes till April, or it never does. But if you don't like the first, any of the first candidates that you interview, we'll go find some more. We'll find one until we find the right one for you. I've never had that experience where the board hasn't found a candidate in the first slate, but it has happened, I'm sure. And I know in the proposal it said we won't recruit your superintendent for at least his or her first 2 contracts. Personally, Tom and I have never recruited a superintendent that we've placed someplace. We have a vested interest in making sure we're finding the right person for you. So we're not going to come back in 5 years and snatch him or her back. If for any reason during the first year, if it doesn't work out, we will redo your search for expenses only, and expenses would be, advertising and mileage and that sort of thing, but there would be no charge if we didn't get it right the first time or if the superintendent left in the first year.
And then maybe
That's never happened either, thank goodness, to me anyway.
Just to wrap things up, you can decide whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but Kathy and I have worked together on 3 searches. And we give it our all. We do our very best with every search we've done. In this particular case, it's a little more personal. I worked here. I worked with you on the last search. Kathy lives in the community, has lived here for a long time. And, as hard as we're going to work for anybody, there's a little something extra that the vested interest that we have, personal interest that we want to be very, very successful with the search if you choose us.
What questions do you have for us?
At this time, if we choose you, will you have other searches that you're going to be doing at the same time? Or will?
Well, that's always possible. I did 4 searches last year. And as soon as one was wrapping up, the other one started. So
I did
it
4
worked
as
out.
well.
I did 4, but none of them overlapped. I've been part of one other presentation that was with the Waukegan School District, and this is similar to Mark, someone who is tending to retire at the end of next year. There are so many hours that you need to put in, and there are enough days, for at least 2 to be going on at the same time, if that's possible. But the answer is yes, it's possible.
I'm doing the Aptekissic trip search. We just started that one, but they too want to be finished before winter break. The nice thing, though, about doing more than one search at a time is that you meet even more candidates. And so you might get an applicant for one of the searches, and maybe they didn't know that this other position was open, but you've met them, and you know what, you're not quite right for this job, but you're kind of what this district's looking for. So that has happened before, so it's not a bad thing, and I guarantee you that whatever time it takes is the time that we'll put in.
And I should emphasize, we're both retired. And now I can't speak for Kathy, but for me, it means I've got no place to go and plenty of time to get there. But, being retired, we could put in all the time that's necessary to do a good search here. That's a good question.
I had a question, I forgot it.
While you're thinking of it, well, what's the biggest mistake you see boards make, and how are you going to help us get by it?
Well, I was thinking of this when Kathy was talking about boards that don't like your slate. It happened to me once, where the board, if I told you the board and the community, you'd all say, "Oh yeah."
Don't tell me.
But But it's
Ooh,
where
now
the
I
Board
wanna
of
know.
Education, Board of Education, the members of the board believe they know more about the search process, way more than the consultants do. And, you know your community, that's what you know. And we need to get that information. We know the process, we know the connections, we know how to get the word out, and that's why we work as a team. But when a board kind of disregards what we have to offer, it's sort of like, we're going to hire you, but we're going to want you to do these steps regardless of what, if you know better. That's been a mistake.
Thank you.
I have a question. Of the 96% second contract, how many? 9 of 10? 90 out of 100?
Well, 250. plus
250.
Searches we've done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Julia, did you find your question?
That's coming to me. I think one of them was the one you asked about the mistakes of the board.
Anybody else?
Rick, if I can just add on, one of those 4% was a search that I had done, and the person that was hired didn't complete the first year, took another job. But the other job was going back home to a former district, and for about $35,000 more a year. And so, we went in, we redid the search, and this is about 12 years ago. And the person that replaced the original one's been there ever since. So it wasn't we got to get rid of this guy. It was being drawn away.
The pool, is the pool shallow? Is it deep? I realize we're just a fabulous district, but disregarding that, will there be plenty of candidates, do you think?
I will
Quality
estimate,
candidates.
I'll estimate that you'll have at least 40 applicants. Now, if you say, well, we wanted 55, we can give 55, we can play that game. But I mean, as far as legitimate candidates, you'll have at least 4. The pool is shallow, and it's been shallow for quite a while. The best candidates are as good as they've ever been.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
so
good
the
to
top
know.
candidates are every bit as good as
Good to
they've ever
know.
been. But, it's a matter of convincing them that this is where they want to be.
Well, it's a difficult job, and
Yeah.
it's getting more difficult.
Yeah.
When I became superintendent in '99 till I retired in 2013, the job looked very different. And it gets more difficult and more complex every day. And there are people that say, you know what, I'm really happy being a principal, or I'm really happy being an assistant superintendent. I want to be number 2. I don't want to be number 1. So the people that are out there are some outstanding people out there. But yeah, I mean, where you used to maybe get 60 or 70 or 80 candidates, maybe you're going to get 40, 45, really good ones now.
It's
So
hard to find
just the
people who
reality.
want the responsibility of a principalship. Principalship and superintendent, the top position either in a building or in a district. And I started noticing that 12, 15 years ago, and with the younger people coming into the profession, they didn't seem to network the way I did. And, I didn't want to turn into a curmudgeon too soon, and I didn't want to just say, well, there must be something wrong with these, because I started studying generational differences. And it's just, I'm a baby boomer, and the Generation Xers,
Yeah.
millennials, they're different. They
They are.
have different motivations, and, it's silly to try to change that. It's smart to understand it, because, your job as a leader is to motivate people, and unless you understand what their motivators are, and that has a lot to do with generation.
But I will say, too, that we will find excellent candidates for that slate, and our goal is to make it kind of a hard decision for you, to have 6 people that any one of whom could do the job and be really good, and then it's just going to be a matter of fit. Who do we feel comfortable with? Who do we think this is going to be a good marriage with? Because it really is kind of what it is at the end of the day. It's got to be somebody that you like and respect and whose company you enjoy. You spend a lot of time together. So the goal is to bring you 6 people, all of whom could do the job. And then it's your job to figure out which one is going to be the best fit. It's important.
Collecting all the information, from various community members, much like this board, lot of different opinions, different priorities. How do you disseminate that? How do you weigh certain opinions and versus others, and how do you deal with situations where you have people that maybe are very opinionated? And this really kind of a general question, but
it's a
just
good
education
question.
for me.
The structure that we use, there are three, Kathy said there are three basic questions. What are the strengths of the district? What are the challenges? And we tell people, maybe most important, we phrase it carefully, what are the qualities and characteristics the next superintendent needs to have to be successful here? And the here part, you might underline
key.
that 3 or 4 times, because there are good people out there. You brought them in here as your superintendent, they'd fall on their face. And we need to understand why. And so the structure of the 3 questions help. Even with opinionated people who want to get off, we can pull them back because of the structure. That helps. And then it's those comments that we continue to hear over and over again from a wide variety of people and groups that says, well, this looks like it's a community concern. And even after we're done with the profile, and some people get information to us late, it's still informing us, the shape of the next superintendent, the skill set is always evolving, and so that's what we're looking for, the people with the skill set that best meet the needs.
And the focus group piece and the open forum piece, as Tom said, that's a little bit more subjective, and we are listening for themes and things we're hearing again and again and again and again. The survey, though, obviously is very quantifiable, and we would come back to you and say, okay, 87% of the people said this, and we divide the survey up by groups of respondents. So we could tell you, here's what parents think the top 5 educational strengths of the district are. Here's what staff members think the top 5 educational strengths of the district are. Sometimes they're a little different. And that, I think, too, provides some good information for board members.
That's important for you to know. When there seems to be a disconnect that.
So we can disaggregate that survey information lots of different ways. But the focus group piece is just, I think it's just, we become good listeners. And I'm a former business ed teacher, so I type like the whiz. And I bring my laptop, and I literally record pretty much everything people say. And then, you can go back and go, okay, we heard this 17 times. Oh my gosh, that might be a theme, So,
Okay.
yeah,
I'm
that's how we do it.
former math teacher, football coach, so this listening thing came a little later. When I learned the importance of it was as a dean of students at East Aurora High School, dean of students. You understand how important it is to listen and communicate to people that you hear what they're, not only hear what they're saying, but you have a pretty good idea of how they're feeling. And you do that, and you don't do it to manipulate anybody, but if you can communicate that, you win people over. It's easier for them to hear, well, I disagree from you, if they first believe that you took the time and understood what you said.
Yes.
As a corollary to Mike's question, I'm interested to hear how you would recommend we engage the community. It's easy and simple to talk about getting the community involved, but getting them to participate is a different story. And I'd like to hear some of your success stories as in other searches that, you were successful in engaging the community and getting a lot of involvement in the process.
Well, I think one of the first things I would do, and I'm sure I still have my files, is to look at all the different groups that were invited to be part last time. I think there were like 31, which still, you still as a school district hold the all-time
I was
record.
going to say, that's a
number.
record.
Yeah, I know, that is the record. So you have that to be proud of, but a really good job, Don, was done 8 years ago in identifying various groups from business leaders in the community to governmental leaders in the community. May even if you have a ministerial association, Chamber of Commerce, and then your school groups, your band boosters, sports boosters, however you organize that way. there were a lot of groups identified. It was a very busy couple of weeks, but we, as a result, now, there wasn't any problem getting them to participate.
Right.
So that's.
They're being
I was
invited.
Curious about it. Yeah, I mean, have you had issues getting people to participate, and if so, I mean, what have you done to maybe help with that? Is that
In the
little bit of
focus
what you're
groups, I've never had, I've never been on a search where we had problems with getting people to come to those focus groups. I think people are usually kind of flattered to be asked. This board wants your input. They've asked us to invite you to hear what you have to say. So I think, I've never been in a search where we've had problems with focus groups.
There's one group, Michael, everybody, that, the open forum, the community forum.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Very seldom do we have much of a turnout. Now, when we talk to boards about it, some of you think, oh my God, you're going to get hundreds of people coming in and complaining about this or that. Again, that wouldn't happen anyway because we focus on the 3 questions and we can keep people focused. We're used to doing that. But, my gosh.
That's interesting.
Excuse me?
I just said that's interesting.
Yeah, you might get 10, 12 people show up. Now, other part of your question, what have we done to encourage more of that? We haven't really done anything other than make the opportunity available. Now,
Well,
maybe they were satisfied with either being part of a focus group or being able to provide input online. But that's the only focus group that we really have traditionally have a low turnout in all kinds of districts.
And we would, we suggest that you, put it on your website, that you put it on your marquees, that you do the automated phone call blast to everybody. Yeah, we do not get a lot of people to show up to the community open forum. Maybe it's because we have the survey as well, and people think, well, I'm just going to take the survey. I'm not going to go. I'm busy. But the other focus groups, the small groups of targeted stakeholders, we've never had a problem getting people to come to those. They kind of like it.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so
Good
much
to
for
see
your
you.
time.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
This
Kathy.
is a
Nancy, is it possible, we saw 2 groups. Is it possible to just take a poll out of the gate,
If that's okay with you, I was actually going to suggest the
then
same
to go
thing.
through all this?
Yeah.
I mean, just to feel the beat of the street, see where we're at as a group, and then maybe discuss.
If that's
Something.
okay with Pete.
Yeah, yeah.
This is your
Can I just ask, what's the cost difference between the 2? Or are they about the same?
2,000.
Is there a difference with the price guarantee, Pete?
Well, we would have to, in the paper, there's a $2,000 difference.
Yeah.
The HYA talked about matching any price as long as the services are the same.
Yes.
The question would be, would they see it as being exactly the
Right.
same? Or
Right.
would they say there's a little bit of a difference and thus the rationale for a higher fee?
There was a cap on expenses as well, I think, at school exec at 1,900, and I didn't see that in hazards.
Correct.
So I'm going to start.
Go for it.
I could go with either group, to be honest, but I have to say I like school exec better. I thought they both had wonderful things to offer. I just felt more comfortable with the people from school exec. So I'm going to vote for school exec.
Okay, well, I liked both also. The only thing with school exec I can see, are they going to be complacent? Oh, we did it once, and are they going to just maybe not beat the street as much as they should, or beat the bushes, I guess, or whatever? Are they going to be a little bit more complacent with their performance? That's the only concern I had.
So would you prefer to see Hazard Young, or?
I don't know. I could go either way, but my only concern that I had would be, I like the fact that Hazard Young was only going to do 1 search, and that's it. You got this guy, start to finish, that's all he's going to do. I like that. But then these guys, maybe they know a little bit. I liked Catherine Robbins a lot. I thought she was really with it. I thought a little bit of the complacency with Tom. And I that's my that was my takeaway. But I could go either way. I could.
Deb?
I've actually felt the same way. I could probably go with either one. I think we have a good base with Dr. Atea, which makes me have a little bit of affinity for that group, okay? I did like the fact, just like Rick was saying, that they were going to do our search and that was it. But I have to say, I really liked Kathy Robbins.
Right.
Personally, I did. I could feel myself being sort of, just drawn to her and very comfortable with her, and she's, just a kind of a go-getter is what I feel. Plus, she lives right here in this community.
Yeah, she
so
really knows.
she is part, she's just sort of part of that and a bit accountable at the
Yes.
end when people are talking about it. She's either going to shy away and say, well, I didn't do that search, or she's going to be really proud of it, which I feel the secondary would be. That's what I
Where
get from.
she's headed.
That's what I get from her.
Yeah.
But I do worry a little bit about just a little,
Yeah.
a little bit.
I felt that School Exec Connect was stronger in their RFP, and then I think what I heard tonight just affirmed that for me. I liked the accountability piece. I just felt there was a little more openness and honesty, too, in terms of how they presented themselves this evening. Not as concerned about telling us what they thought we might want to hear, but giving us honest answers. And they answered several questions of mine through the course of their presentation, such that I didn't have that many at the end. I thought that they had an interesting streamlined process that was a little different than the Hazard Young approach as well. The fact that they would be willing to stop halfway through. I mean, there just seems to
They
be,
did before.
to me, it just seems like there's more there's flexibility, willing to kind of move with how the process is moving. Their 90% second contracts is, I think, is a pretty great statistic,
Impressive.
considering that the Hazard Young group was 10% were, within 4 years, we're looking for something new. Or
But
left
don't
for
forget,
whatever
they've
reason.
done about 1,000 searches
Sure.
versus the 250 for here. Just
Certainly.
It's a much
the more
more
you do, the more, yeah.
The same,
much
yeah,
bigger.
I understand.
Right.
But I think there was good relevancy in their experience, and the fact that they did the District 58 search 4 years ago as well, which I'm surprised they didn't speak about more in terms of their connection to the community. I know District 58 is just, pretty much just Downers Grove, but there's some familiarity with
Right.
the groups
Maybe because
and
it's
the
a great
community.
school district, too.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So
but-
that's where I'm at. And Don?
I feel pretty strongly that School Exec Connect is the right firm for our school. I think one of the most important things that we should consider is personality and ability to be able to work
Right.
with these two individuals, both representatives. And I think tonight, meeting Tom and Kathy, I don't know personally, but she has a sterling reputation at our firm and is well-known in the community. And I think Rick and Deb's observations were definitely indicative of that. I just think I see those two as being good representatives of the board as our agents in the community. As I was listening to them speak, I could envision them conducting public focus groups, forums, meeting with our staff, and I think I would feel real comfortable with them doing that. Not that I felt any reservations with the other two. I just felt a little bit more at ease with Tom and Kathy. So I feel pretty strongly that would be my vote to go with School Exec Connect.
Just so you know, we work with the gentleman named Bill Attia, who's actually from Hazard Young and Attia. And when we were talking about this first, he said, he brought up the fact that you need to feel really comfortable with whomever you go with. That is one of the key indicators.
Okay.
Julia? I'm sorry, let me
No,
save you for last. Go ahead.
I'd have to agree, since we did work with School Exec Connect before, although we worked with Linda Hansen before. But I don't think, I think Tom seemed relaxed, but I don't think he'd be complacent. I think he realizes this is important. And having her in the community, the accountability piece, she's going to go to the grocery store. And they're going to say, what? What did you do? So
Can't hide.
I think they will do good work. I'm a little concerned that the other searches are going on at the same time, but I think they've got the resources to make it happen. I think they will give us very, very good service. I do know Steve Humphrey from when he was the superintendent at District 88, and he was very, very, very well thought of superintendent. I believe he was Mark's mentor when Mark first became the superintendent here. I don't know if your firm was familiar with Steve or before? Okay. But good to hear that Kathy's reputation is sterling. So I would feel very comfortable with that firm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I felt comfortable with both of them. I felt that Hazard Young was a little more aggressive.
A little slicker?
I got that impression from them. And I think that with our community, that Tom and Kathy would fit in a little bit better. And I don't think that our community would want that aggressive, slick, thank you, type of
I had the same impression.
of folks. And so I think that would be better to get input. And so therefore, like I said, both of them are excellent firms, so I would choose the latter.
I would just like to also add that I thought that the fact that they both have such tremendous outreach through their professional association roles was amazing. So we have 5 people who were supportive of school exec. We have 2 who are HYA, but could go either way.
Yeah.
Would you feel comfortable going with school?
I wasn't saying I was HYA.
No.
I said I was comfortable with both of them.
Right, both of you did, but you were kind of
Yeah.
leaning a
Well,
little.
I'm very comfortable with school.
Okay.
Extremely comfortable. And if I had to actually
The only thing I
choose,
wanted to
think
say,
that's,
I
that's where I'd
wanted.
go.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
Deb didn't
I'm
finish.
sorry, Nancy.
Oh, no, that's all right. I was saying, I was just trying to, to play that little devil's advocate both ways, but I'm great with both, and if I had to choose, if it was just, not being, going around the table giving the pros and the cons, I would choose school exec.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out there my impression for the discussion. Because I did feel that Tom was a little complacent with you two. And so I just don't want him, and then we kind of grilled him about other searches, and 2 searches and 3 searches we can handle. That was my only concern. Because the other one came out and said, 1 search, 1 district, that's all I'm going to be doing.
We're your people.
That was
And
attractive.
It was, and my
Yeah, that
feedback
is.
from Tom was, I did this before, and I know these 2, and I can do 2 or 3 more and have all these balls juggling. That was my only concern.
Yeah.
Not
And I
having
think
any,
we can.
but I actually
make
wrote my
that concern
positive,
known
was
to them.
Catherine. How can I support hiring the form? I put her name on it.
I did too.
So,
So Pete, is that what you needed?
How do you?
What do you think?
How do you feel? What did you hear, Pete?
To be honest with you,
Okay.
this really needs to be your
Yeah, I knew you were
decision.
gonna say that.
My goal or my role here
you
was
diplomat.
yeah, you facilitated. That's it.
Okay, we're done.
That was easy
But
then.
it was great, Pete.
Yeah,
It was good for me.
yeah.
It's really critically important because many of you may be here long past my tenure in District 99, that you're comfortable with the firm that we're using, because this is a critically important decision for the long-term duration of District 99. So it's really most important what the 7 of you think and believe as far as how we move forward. I don't want to insert myself into the process because I don't want to compromise future relations between myself and my soon-to-be new boss based on potentially having steered one search firm over another with their own slate of people that they'll be recruiting from, et cetera. So I need to be like Switzerland.
Yeah, that's okay.
in this
We're gonna
process.
talk smack
we
about
get
you
it.
anyway.
Yeah, very diplomatic.
Okay.
Well, that was easy.
Are we
I
done?
was just going to mention that if my memory is cloudy for 8 years ago, I think we may have checked references for for the firms, but I'm not sure we really even need to do
No.
that.
I
because-
think
So
Bill,
I think you
Bill
value
counters the
them
one,
more.
Well, and I
and
think,
your
didn't
experience with the other one
Pete
counters
and,
the other.
And
I
you,
think,
you checked at them, right?
Yeah,
They're
and
the
I
ones that
had
were
checked
and
on
and
we've
they
worked
narrowed
with
it down
Bill.
to the
the
first two.
the
Yeah.
firms prior to soliciting
Right.
proposals from the six. If you
Mhm.
remember
Right.
originally.
Yes.
Right.
and
We did
we
have-
had the
right.
one that dropped out on their own.
Yes.
And we had the Illinois School Board Association that we quickly ruled out because they would not recruit current superintendents. So before we ever had solicited the
Right.
six.
You
we had
sort of
already-
vetted them
Yeah.
at the beginning, and the two that we ended up
Oh, see ya.
choosing, one, you used before, so to me,
I
that,
agree, I agree.
right? And then the other one, with just
Just
the
wanted to be sure we
association
were covering
with,
the bases.
with Bill, Ateo would have been good enough for me.
Yeah,
So,
right,
Right.
right.
Yeah. I think we're good, right?
Yeah, you gonna call us out?
Got the consensus?
All right, so
Okay.
everybody's.
reception of visitors.
Yes, I know. I saw. At this time, we're going to have the second reception of visitors. Anyone would like to come forward and speak? Wow, the chairs are really full. Okay, if not, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Julia and Don? All right. All in favor?
Aye,
Aye.
Motion carries.
right, thank you, good job.